My in-laws mocked me and gave me a $20 coupon for my birthday until I bought their dream house. The Hawthorne family dining room always felt like a courtroom to me. The long mahogany table stretched out like a judge's bench, with my mother-in-law, Elaine, perched at one end like she was ready to pass sentence. My father-in-law, Walter, sat opposite her, his stern face a permanent fixture above his perfectly pressed collar. Between them sat the jury, my husband's siblings, cousins, and the occasional family friend, all witnesses to my ongoing trial of not good enough. Tonight was supposed to be different. It was my 32nd birthday, after all. "Smile, Maya," my husband David whispered, his hand squeezing mine under the table as the Hawthorne's housekeeper carried in a small store-bought cake. The candles flickered weakly, exactly 3 of them. I looked questioningly at Elaine. "One for each decade," she explained with a thin smile. "Plus a little extra for good measure." The table tittered with polite laughter. I didn't have the heart to remind her that I'd turned 32, not 31. Details about me were always fuzzy in Elaine's mind, like I was a background character not worth remembering correctly. "Make a wish, darling," David encouraged, his eyes bright with a kindness that had first drawn me to him 5 years earlier. Sometimes I wondered if he was actually related to these people at all. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and silently wished for the same thing I'd been wishing for since I married into this family: acceptance. Or, at the very least, respect. I blew out the candles to scattered applause. "Now, presents," announced Cynthia, David's younger sister, who at least tried to be kind to me, even if her efforts often felt performative. She slid a small gift bag across the table. "This one's from me and Jeremy." Inside was a bath set from a mid-range department store. The price tag was still attached, $24.99. Cynthia had never been good at removing tags. "It's lovely," I said, genuinely pleased. "Thank you." Walter cleared his throat. "Our turn, I suppose." He produced a small envelope and handed it to David, not me. "For your wife." David passed it to me with an encouraging smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Something in his expression made my stomach tighten. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a coupon for $20 off at Save Mart, the discount grocery store across town. The expiration date was for next week. I stared at it, waiting for the punchline. "Well?" prompted Elaine, her eyebrows raised expectantly. "It's a coupon," I said, looking up at their watching faces. "For groceries," Walter clarified, like I might have missed that detail. "Since you're always so budget-conscious." The emphasis he placed on those words made it clear what he really meant. Cheap. Poor. Beneath them. "Now you can get that discount pasta brand you like so much," Elaine added sweetly. "The one in the plastic bags." I felt my cheeks burn. Once, during a family dinner 6 months ago, I'd mentioned growing up eating a certain brand of pasta because it was all my single mother could afford. Somehow, this had transformed in Elaine's mind into a preference rather than a necessity. "Or perhaps some of those canned vegetables," added Walter's brother Frank, who was visiting from Connecticut. "Didn't you say your mother made a casserole with those?" The table erupted in soft, knowing laughter, the kind that says we're not laughing at you, just near you. But I knew better. David squeezed my hand again, harder this time. "Mom, Dad, come on," he said, his voice light but strained. "Maya cooks better than anyone in this family. She was just telling me about her childhood." "Of course she does," Elaine nodded, not looking at me. "It's wonderful that she's so resourceful." I forced myself to smile. "Thank you for the coupon," I said, folding it carefully back into the envelope. "It's very thoughtful." "We know how practical you are," Walter replied. "Unlike some people who just want frivolous things." The barb was aimed at Cynthia, who had recently asked her parents for help buying a new car. The Hawthornes never missed an opportunity to pit their children, and now their children's spouses, against each other. "Who wants cake?" David asked loudly, clearly eager to change the subject. As the housekeeper began serving slices, I excused myself to use the restroom. In the hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself in the antique mirror that had been in the Hawthorne family for generations. I looked like I always did in this house, slightly faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. My mother had always told me I had her eyes, determined, undefeated. But lately, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who was slowly disappearing. 5 more minutes, I whispered to myself. Eat the cake, thank them again, and we can go home. When I returned to the table, they were deep in conversation about the newest addition to their social circle, a woman who had married into the Johnson family, apparently another old money clan in their circle. Absolutely no breeding, Elaine was saying. I heard she grew up in some apartment complex in the city. Well, the Johnsons always did have a weakness for charity cases, Walter replied. They stopped talking when they noticed me standing there. The silence that followed was thick with implication. Maya, Elaine said brightly. We were just discussing the Johnson wedding. Such a lovely affair, wasn't it? I hadn't been invited to the Johnson wedding. Neither had David, but I knew that was because of me. The Hawthorns had attended without us. I'm sure it was, I said, sitting back down beside David, who looked miserable. As I picked at my cake, too sweet, too dry, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't just anger or hurt. It was something harder, something crystalline forming around my heart. I had spent 5 years trying to prove myself to these people. 5 years of perfect manners, of swallowing their barbs, of pretending not to notice when they spoke about me as if I wasn't in the room. 5 years of watching David struggle between loyalty to his family and defense of his wife. They would never see me as anything but the poor girl who somehow trapped their golden son. The girl from the wrong side of town, with the single mother and the community college education. The girl who should be grateful just to be allowed at their table. And in that moment, as Walter made a joke about discount birthdays that sent another wave of gentle laughter around the table, I decided I was done trying. I wouldn't make a scene. I wouldn't cry or yell or tell them exactly what I thought of their $20 coupon that would expire before I could even use it.
No.
I would do something much, much worse. I would prove them wrong. More cake, Maya? Elaine asked, her smile not reaching her eyes. No, thank you, I said, smiling back with newfound clarity. I'm absolutely full. The morning after my birthday disaster, I slipped out of bed at 5:30 a.m. while David was still asleep. He'd apologized profusely on the drive home, as he always did after family gatherings. I'd nodded and forgiven him, as I always did. But this time, the forgiveness felt hollow. I wasn't angry at David, not really. He was caught between worlds, and I understood that. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. I made coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The screen illuminated my face in the pre-dawn darkness as I logged into a private server that no one in the Hawthorne family knew existed. Not even David. Morning, boss lady, read a message from Zoe. Already online despite the early hour. Check your email. I sent the revised pitch deck. 3 years ago, Zoe, Luis, and I had met at a weekend entrepreneurship workshop. We were the odd ones out. Zoe with her purple hair and coding skills, Luis with his finance background but passion for sustainable energy, and me with my marketing degree from a school no one had heard of. We'd bonded over being underestimated. That weekend, over cheap pizza and expensive dreams, we'd formulated the idea for EcoCharge, revolutionary battery recycling technology that could extend the life of electronics by up to 60%. What started as a theoretical concept had evolved into a working prototype in Luis's garage, and finally, a small but functional operation in a rented warehouse space. I opened Zoe's email and reviewed the pitch deck we'd be presenting to Vertex Capital in 2 days. This wasn't just another meeting. After years of bootstrapping, rejections, and near misses, Vertex was our shot at the big leagues. You're up early, David mumbled, shuffling into the kitchen in his pajamas. I quickly minimized the window. Just checking emails, I said, smiling up at him. Work stuff. To the Hawthorns, my work was a vague administrative position at a local marketing firm, a job that Walter had once described as cute, and Elaine had suggested I would eventually leave when we had children. They had no idea that I'd quit that job 18 months ago to focus on EcoCharge full-time. As far as they knew, I spent my days filing papers and answering phones, not building a company that had already filed 2 patents and attracted interest from some of the biggest names in tech. You work too hard, David said, kissing the top of my head. For what they pay you. I felt a twinge of guilt. I hated lying to David, but early on, I'd made the decision to keep EcoCharge separate from my personal life until we knew whether it would succeed or fail. Too many startups crashed and burned, and I couldn't bear the thought of the Hawthorns watching me fail. Besides, David talked. Not maliciously, but casually, over dinners with his parents or drinks with his siblings. Maya's doing this, or Maya's trying that. Each detail of my life becoming fodder for their judgment. I like being busy, I replied, closing my laptop as he poured himself coffee. David left for his law firm an hour later, and I headed not to an office building downtown, but to our warehouse space in an industrial district that the Hawthorns would never deign to visit. Luis was already there, hunched over our latest prototype. There you are, he said without looking up. Happy birthday, by the way. Do anything fun? Got a $20 grocery coupon for my in-laws, I said, hanging up my coat. Luis looked up then, his face a mix of disbelief and amusement. Please tell me you're joking. I wish I was, I sighed, pulling up a stool beside him. What's our status? We're close, he said, returning to the prototype. Really close. If the Vertex meeting goes well? He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew what was riding on this. Zoe arrived 20 minutes later with 3 coffees and a determined expression. 2 days to nail this pitch, she announced. And we're not leaving until it's perfect. For the next 14 hours, we refined, practiced, debated, and fine-tuned. We argued over percentages, projections, and the color of the graphs in our presentation. We ordered takeout and ate it cold when we forgot it was there. We sent our manufacturers last-minute questions about production capacity. This was my real life, not the carefully constructed facade I presented at Hawthorn family gatherings. Here, I wasn't David's charity case wife. I was a founder, a visionary, someone building something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Working late again? Mom's asking if we're coming for Sunday dinner. I stared at the message, my 2 worlds colliding uncomfortably. The Hawthorn Sunday dinners were mandatory attendance in their minds. Missing one without a doctor's note or actual death was considered a personal affront. Tell her yes, I texted back, even as I helped Luis adjust a component in our prototype. Wouldn't miss it. Another lie in a growing collection. Late that night, as we finally packed up to leave, Zoe grabbed my arm. If this works, she said, her eyes bright with exhaustion and hope, everything changes. I nodded, thinking of the Hawthorns' dining room, of Elaine's dismissive glances and Walter's backhanded compliments, of the $20 coupon now sitting in my desk drawer at home. Yes, I said quietly. Everything. Sunday dinner at the Hawthorns arrived with its usual blend of dread and obligation. Our pitch to Vertex Capital was scheduled for the following morning, and my mind was occupied with financial projections and market analyses, rather than which fork to use for the salad course. You seem distracted, David whispered as we pulled into his parents' circular driveway. The house loomed before us, a colonial mansion that had been featured in architectural magazines and local historical tours. Just tired, I replied, plastering on what I hoped was a convincing smile. Big project at work tomorrow. David squeezed my hand. You'll nail it. You always do. If only he knew what I was actually trying to nail. Elaine greeted us at the door herself, which was unusual. Typically, the housekeeper performed this function while she remained seated in the living room, holding court like a queen awaiting subjects. There you are, she exclaimed, her voice pitched with unusual excitement. We were beginning to think you'd be late. Walter appeared behind her, similarly animated. Come in. We have news. David and I exchanged confused glances as we followed them into the house. The usual suspects were already assembled. Cynthia and her husband Jeremy, Walter's brother Frank and his wife, and a couple I recognized as the Prestons, longtime friends of the family. What's going on? David asked as we took our seats. Did someone win the lottery? Better, Walter replied, accepting a glass of champagne from the housekeeper. We've found it. Found what? David looked bewildered. The Aldridge estate, Elaine said reverently, as though naming a holy site. The name meant nothing to me, but a ripple of recognition passed through the room. David straightened beside me. You're kidding, he said. It's for sale? Not publicly, Walter replied with undisguised pride. But Charles Preston here, he nodded at the older man across from us, is golf buddies with the listing agent. We got a private tour yesterday. It's everything we imagined. Elaine sighed dreamily. The original woodwork, the gardens, that view of the valley. The Aldridge estate sits on 10 acres in Hillcrest, David explained to me in a low voice, noting my confusion. It's one of the oldest properties in the county. My parents have been in love with it for as long as I can remember. Not just in love, Walter corrected. Destined for it. My grandfather nearly purchased it in the 40s, but the deal fell through when the market crashed. It's been our white whale ever since. The conversation for the next hour revolved entirely around the house, its historical significance, its architectural details, its privileged position in the most exclusive neighborhood in the county. The formal dining room could easily seat 30, Elaine said, eyes gleaming. Imagine the Christmas parties we could host. And that library, Walter added. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves with the original rolling ladder. I picked at my roast beef, nodding politely but contributing little. These were people who already lived in a home most would consider a mansion. Yet here they were, salivating over an even grander display of wealth and status. So what's the catch? Cynthia eventually asked. If it's so perfect, why haven't you made an offer? A shadow crossed Walter's face. The price is ambitious. Outrageous is more like it, Frank muttered. Worth every penny, Elaine countered. But we're being strategic. The property's been quietly on the market for 8 months. Charles thinks they might be getting desperate. We're waiting for them to come down to a more reasonable number, Walter explained. Patience is key in real estate. Our offer is ready, Elaine added. The moment they drop the price, we'll pounce. As dessert was served, a tiramisu that no one seemed particularly interested in, Mr. Preston leaned forward. The agent hinted they might consider a reduction next month, he said conspiratorially. Something about the owner's son needing capital for a business venture. Perfect, Walter nodded. We can wait. The conversation shifted then to vacation plans and country club gossip, but I remained fixated on the wistful expression that lingered on Elaine's face. I'd never seen her look so human. I hope you get it, I said suddenly, surprising even myself. The table fell quiet. Elaine regarded me with suspicion, as though trying to detect sarcasm in my voice. Thank you, Maya, she finally replied. It would mean a great deal to the family. The family. Not our family. The family. On the drive home, David chattered excitedly about the Aldridge estate, reminiscing about childhood drives past its imposing gates. Dad's obsessed with that place, he said. Ever since his father told him stories about almost owning it. It's like a piece of family mythology. I made appropriate noises of interest while my mind worked on something else entirely. The timing couldn't be more perfect or more terrible depending on your perspective. If our Vertex meeting went well.
No.
That was crazy. Vindictive.
Petty.
But as we pulled into our modest driveway, I couldn't help but picture the look on Elaine's face if she knew that her precious charity case daughter-in-law was on the verge of a windfall that could potentially buy her dream home out from under her. I didn't want the Aldridge estate. I had no use for 10 acres or a 30-person dining room. But the thought had taken root, and by the time we entered our home, the small, comfortable house that Elaine had once called quaint, with that particular inflection that made it sound like an insult, the seed was already beginning to grow. Early night for me, I told David, heading for the stairs. Big day tomorrow. He had no idea just how big. Miss Hawthornton, could you walk us through your 5-year projections one more time? The Vertex Capital Conference room felt impossibly cold as I stood before the panel of investors. 4 men and 1 woman, all in sharp suits with sharper expressions, stared back at me from behind a gleaming table that probably cost more than my car. I took a deep breath, remembering that I wasn't just Maya Chen anymore, the girl from the apartment complex with a single mom and the community college degree. I wasn't even Maya Hawthorne Chen, the disappointing daughter-in-law who received grocery coupons for her birthday. In this room, I was the co-founder and chief marketing officer of EcoCharge, and I knew our technology inside and out. Certainly, I said, advancing to the next slide. As you can see, our conservative estimate shows market penetration of 17% by year 3, resulting in projected revenue of. The words flowed easily after that. Beside me, Luis handled the technical questions with confident precision, while Zoe fielded inquiries about scaling and manufacturing with her usual no-nonsense clarity. 2 hours later, we stood in the hallway outside the conference room, too nervous to speak. The lead investor, a woman named Diane Lowell who had built and sold 2 tech companies before joining Vertex, approached us with an unreadable expression. "We need to conduct our due diligence," she said. "Review your patents, verify your prototypes, check your backgrounds." We nodded in unison, hearts sinking. This was standard language for thanks but no thanks. But Diane continued, her serious expression finally cracking into a small smile. "I think we can move quickly. What you've built is impressive. We'd like to fast-track this." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, technical demonstrations, and due diligence interviews. I told David I was working on a major marketing campaign that required long hours. Another lie to add to my growing collection. Then came the day that changed everything. "They want to acquire us," Luis announced, his voice shaking as he read the email on his phone. "Not just invest. Acquire. Full buyout." Zoe and I stared at him in disbelief. "How much?" Zoe finally asked. Luis looked up, his eyes wide. $82 million. The room went silent. We'd been hoping for a Series A investment of maybe $5 million. Acquisition wasn't even on our radar. I began, unable to find the words. $27 million each after taxes and paying out the early investors, Luis calculated, always the numbers guy. $27 million. The figure bounced around my head like a pinball, making no sense. People like me didn't suddenly come into that kind of money. People like the Hawthorns did. We signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon in early April. By Wednesday morning, the money was in our accounts, and a press release was scheduled for the following week. I sat in my car in the parking garage for nearly an hour, staring at the balance on my banking app, afraid that if I refreshed the screen, it would all disappear. I drove home in a daze, wondering how to tell David. We hadn't discussed children yet, but I knew he wanted them. Now we could give them everything, the best schools, travel, security. No child of mine would ever need to eat discount pasta from plastic bags. But as I pulled into our driveway, another thought surfaced, darker, more insistent. The Aldridge estate. The house the Hawthorns couldn't stop talking about. The house they were waiting to pounce on when the price dropped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I'd pulled out my phone and was searching for the property online. It wasn't listed publicly, just as Walter had said. But I had resources now. I called a high-end real estate agent whose name I'd seen on billboards around town. "I'm interested in the Aldridge estate," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I understand it's not publicly listed, but I'm prepared to make a serious offer." The agent sounded skeptical until I mentioned a price range that made her voice shift from professional politeness to eager accommodation. "I'll see what I can find out," she promised. "May I ask how you heard about the property?" "Family connections," I replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. By the time David came home that evening, I'd spoken with the agent 3 more times. The Aldridge estate could be mine, no, ours, for exactly the asking price, which was indeed eye-watering, but now within my reach. I should have told David everything that night. About EcoCharge, the acquisition, the millions sitting in my bank account. About how his parents' dream home could now be ours if we wanted it. Instead, I made pasta for dinner, not the discount kind, and listened as he talked about a difficult client. I kissed him goodnight and told him I loved him. All of that was true. What was also true? The next morning, while he was in the shower, I transferred a significant portion of my new fortune to a newly created LLC with an innocuous name. By noon, I had engaged not just a real estate agent, but also a financial advisor, an attorney, and a home inspector, all sworn to absolute confidentiality. "We'll need to move quickly," my agent advised. "There's another interested party." I knew exactly who that other party was. The thought of outmaneuvering Walter and Elaine Hawthorne gave me a thrill I wasn't proud of, but couldn't deny. "How quickly can we close?" I asked. "With an all-cash offer? 2 weeks, maybe less." I thought of the $20 coupon, now tucked away in my desk, of Elaine's dismissive glances and Walter's condescending tone, of 5 years of subtle humiliations and not-so-subtle reminders of my place in their world. "Do it," I said. The Aldridge estate closed even faster than expected, 11 days from offer to keys in hand. The seller, apparently impressed by my no contingency, all-cash offer at full asking price, was motivated to move quickly. I signed the papers in a downtown law office while David was at a court hearing. I hadn't set foot on the property yet, hadn't even driven by it. Everything had happened through photos, video tours, and extensive documentation. Now, as I followed my real estate agent's car up the long, winding driveway, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. The house came into view, and my breath caught. Photos hadn't done it justice. 3 stories of elegant stone and timber, with wide windows that caught the afternoon light. Gardens that, even in early spring, hinted at spectacular summer blooms. A view that swept across the valley below, taking in the entire town. "Welcome home, Miss Chun," my agent said, handing me a set of keys that felt impossibly heavy in my palm. For one dizzy moment, I considered calling David immediately, telling him everything, asking him to meet me here, to share in this incredible, impulsive, possibly insane purchase. But another part of me, the part that remembered every slight, every backhanded compliment, every look of disdain from the Hawthorns, held back. That part wanted to savor what was coming. I spent the next week in secret trips to the house, meeting with interior designers, security installers, and cleaning crews. I arranged for minimal but elegant furnishings to be delivered and set up in key rooms. I had the kitchen stocked, the bar filled, fresh flowers placed in strategic locations, all while maintaining my normal routine at home with David, who remained completely unaware. Then it happened. At Sunday dinner, which I'd insisted on attending despite David's offer to make excuses for me, Elaine could barely contain her excitement. "We're seeing the Aldridge estate again tomorrow," she announced over appetizers. "Charles says the owners are finally considering lowering the price." Walter nodded smugly. They've realized their initial asking was unrealistic. No one would pay that for a property that needs updating, no matter how historic. I took a slow sip of wine, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. "That's wonderful," I said. "I hope it works out this time." "Oh, it will," Elaine replied confidently. "Our offer is ready. Walter's meeting with the bank in the morning." "What time is your showing?" I asked casually. 3 o'clock, Walter said. "Exclusive access. Charles arranged it specially." I nodded, mentally calculating. It was perfect, a Monday afternoon when David would be in court all day. The next day, I arrived at the Aldridge estate at 2:30, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress I'd purchased for the occasion. I supervised as the catering staff I'd hired set up champagne and hors d'oeuvres in the grand foyer. I checked that everything was perfect, including the small wrapped package I placed on the entryway table. At precisely 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and opened the massive front door myself. Walter and Elaine stood on the threshold, accompanied by Charles Preston. Their expressions shifted from anticipation to confusion as they registered my presence. "Maya?" Walter frowned. "What are you doing here?" I smiled and stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. "Please come in." They hesitated, exchanging baffled glances before stepping into the foyer. Their confusion deepened at the sight of the champagne and food. "I don't understand," Elaine said, her voice tight. "Where is the owner? Charles, what's going on?" Charles looked equally perplexed. I arranged this showing through the listing agent. She didn't mention anything about. I asked her not to, I said, reaching for a champagne flute and offering it to Elaine, who automatically took it. I wanted this to be a surprise. A surprise? Walter repeated slowly. Maya, are you working for the real estate company now? Is that what this is about? I laughed softly, the sound echoing in the grand space. No, Walter. I'm not working for anyone anymore. I reached for the small package on the table and handed it to Elaine. A housewarming gift. From me to you. With suspicious eyes, she unwrapped it, then froze. In her hands was a framed item, the $20 Save Mart coupon she and Walter had given me for my birthday. The expiration date clearly visible. I don't, she began, looking up at me with dawning horror. Welcome to the Aldridge estate, I said, raising my own champagne flute. Or rather, welcome to my home. The silence that followed was absolute. Walter's face flushed a deep, dangerous red. Elaine's complexion did the opposite, draining to a sickly pale. That's not possible, Walter finally managed. You couldn't possibly afford. Oh, but I could, I interrupted gently. You see that cute administrative job you thought I had? That wasn't exactly accurate. I gave them the briefest explanation of EcoCharge, the acquisition, my newfound wealth. I watched as their expressions cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally, a desperate calculation. This is wonderful news, Elaine said, attempting to recover. Her smile was brittle. David must be thrilled. David doesn't know yet, I replied. But he will very soon. I wanted you to be the first to see it. We should call him, Walter suggested, reaching for his phone. Have him join us for this celebration. All in good time, I said. First, would you like a tour? I believe you're familiar with the 30-person dining room. Perfect for Christmas parties, I'm told. The tour of the Aldridge estate was exquisitely uncomfortable. Walter and Elaine followed me through the grand rooms with the stunned compliance of people who had just witnessed a car accident. Charles Preston had tactfully excused himself after the first 10 minutes, muttering something about family matters and practically running to his car. I showed them everything. The library with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the gardens with their century-old oak trees, the wine cellar that Walter had once described as legendary at a family dinner. With each new space, their expressions grew more strained, their comments more forced. The master suite has a remarkable view of the sunrise, I noted as we entered the expansive bedroom. Though I suppose I'll have to start calling it the primary suite now. Times change, don't they? Elaine's smile was a grimace. Maya, dear, this is all very impressive. But have you really thought this through? A house of this size, for just you and David? It's an investment, I replied smoothly, echoing Walter's favorite phrase. Real estate in this area only appreciates, after all. When we returned to the foyer, Walter finally found his voice again. I think we should discuss this as a family, he said firmly. This house has significant meaning to the Hawthorne name. Does it? I asked innocently. I was under the impression your grandfather never actually owned it. Walter's face darkened. That's not the point. This property represents generations of. I'm not interested in selling. I cut in gently. But you're welcome to visit. Perhaps for my birthday next year? I was thinking of hosting a proper celebration. The ride down in the elevator was silent, tense. As we reached the main floor, Elaine turned to me, her composure intact but her eyes cold. You've changed, she said quietly. I smiled.
No, Elaine.
I've just stopped pretending to be who you thought I was. After they left, I stood on the balcony overlooking the valley, a strange hollowness replacing the satisfaction I'd expected to feel. The revenge had gone perfectly, better than I could have scripted. Yet something was missing. David. The truth. Our partnership. I called him from the landline of our new home. Can you meet me? I asked. There's something I need to show you. Something important. Now, he sounded concerned. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I assured him. I just need you to come to this address. I gave him the details, then added, And David? Drive yourself. You might be here a while. When he arrived an hour later, his confusion at the grand estate was palpable. Are you house-sitting for someone? He asked as I led him through the entrance hall. Not exactly, I replied, guiding him to the library where I'd set up 2 comfortable chairs and a bottle of the expensive scotch he loved but rarely indulged in. We need to talk. For the next 2 hours, I told him everything. About EcoCharge, the acquisition, the money. About his parents and the house, and my elaborate revenge. About all the lies I'd told him over the years, beginning with the fiction that I was content being underestimated by his family. I expected anger, hurt, perhaps even betrayal. What I didn't expect was the quiet understanding that settled across his features. I knew something was happening, he said finally. I just didn't know what. You've been different. More confident. Less worried about what my parents think. You're not angry? He smiled sadly. About the business success? God, no, Maya. I'm incredibly proud. About the lies? He sighed. I understand why. My family can be a lot. And the house? I asked hesitantly. This house. He looked around at the wood-paneled walls, the leather-bound books, the history embedded in every cornerstone. It's beautiful, he admitted. But Maya, this isn't us. This is my parents' dream, not ours. The truth of his words hit me with startling clarity. I'd purchased a monument to revenge, not a home for our future. What do we do now? I whispered. That's up to you, he said. It's your money, your house. Our money, I corrected. And maybe not our house. 3 months later, I hosted my first and last party at the Aldridge estate. It was my 33rd birthday, celebrated with a catered dinner for 50 people. Friends from college, colleagues from EcoCharge, David's friends from law school, even Zoe and Luis, with their respective partners. The Hawthorns were conspicuously absent, despite receiving hand-delivered invitations. After the guests left, David found me on the balcony, looking out at the twinkling lights of the town below. Happy, he asked, wrapping his arms around me. Getting there, I replied honestly. The next day, we listed the Aldridge estate for sale. Not because we needed the money, but because David was right. It wasn't our dream. It was a beautiful prison built of spite and old wounds. We bought a modernist home instead, with clean lines and abundant light, on a quiet street across town from the Hawthorns. We set up a charitable foundation with half of my acquisition money, focusing on educational opportunities for children from single-parent households. Walter and Elaine eventually purchased another historic property, not as grand as the Aldridge estate, but impressive nonetheless. We exchanged cards at Christmas. They've never visited our home. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I take out the framed coupon from my desk drawer and look at it. Not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a strange sort of thank you for the motivation, for the fuel that drove me when nothing else would. I don't need it anymore, but I keep it anyway. After all, some investments pay dividends in unexpected ways.